Hello and welcome. My name is Alan and we are back with more the Supreme Court, the judicial branch of the United States. As we do this, I'm going to be working on getting antibiotics and everything in me, so if you see me moving about, that's what I'm doing here. But anyway, before we jump into the video, I do want to go ahead and remind you I've got two ways to donate to the channel if you are so inclined. I have a Patreon account, which is a monthly donation system, and I have a Ko-fi account, which can do much the same, but also allows you to make single one-time donations. I'll have links to both in the description box below the video. If you are in financial trouble or donating would put you in financial trouble, please don't donate. Tough enough out there for everybody with the idiots in charge as it is. If you can afford it and you wish to donate, thank you. I really do appreciate it. It's me, myself, and I do the research, filming, editing, and posting. And yeah, I have made a personal choice not to do commercials, and I don't get any money from the videos as of yet, because essentially my view count's not high enough. But anyway, with all that said and explained, let's jump into this video. Today, we are looking at two more justices. This Melville court sees a lot of new faces get placed on the Supreme Court. And today we are going to be looking at William R. Day and William Henry Moody. William R. Day, Associate Justice from Ohio. He replaces George Shiras Jr. And he is confirmed on February 23rd, 1903 through acclamation, just meaning pretty much everybody was like, yeah, it's agreed, he's a great choice. And he would serve from 1903 to 1922 before retiring from the bench, having served for 19 years and 256 days. He was appointed to the Supreme Court by Teddy Roosevelt. With that said, let's delve into who he is a little further here. William Rufus Day was probably born to be a judge. His maternal great-grandfather was Chief Justice of the Connecticut Supreme Court. His maternal grandfather served on the Ohio Supreme Court, and his father was Chief Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court. So while establishing a solid reputation as a lawyer, he struck up a friendship with William McKinley and became his advisor. So he's got family that was judges on these state Supreme Courts. So yeah, and then he becomes a lawyer and befriends President William McKinley. I don't know if McKinley is at that point president or with his ambitions to become president, but yeah. Day was popular in Ohio. He was elected to the state trial court with the endorsement of both the Democrats and the Republicans, and a few years later, President Benjamin Harrison nominated him to the federal district court, but his frail health required that he decline the nomination. So President Benjamin Harrison um, actually nominates him to go to a federal court, the federal district court, and both Democrats and Republicans trusted his judgment. Thus, he would be elected to the state trial court in Ohio. Day served in several capacities in William McKinley's cabinet, which it pays to have friends in high places because, like we said, he became an advisor and friend to William McKinley. Later, McKinley named him to the Federal Appeals Court, and he would finally get nominated to the High Court by McKinley's successor, Teddy Roosevelt. So, yeah. Born in Ravenna, Ohio, April 17th, 1849, died July the 9th, 1923. English, Lutheran religion. Family was upper class and wealthy. Mother Emily Spalding and his father Luther Day. His father was a lawyer as well, which his father would become Chief Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court. His grandfather on his mother's side would be on the Supreme Court, and the great-grandfather on his mother's side on the Connecticut, with Chief Justice of the Connecticut Supreme Court. So like I said, yeah, he seemed to be kind of destined for the court. Let's see. Now let's go ahead and look at Justia. Joined the Supreme Court March 2nd, 1903, replacing George Shiras. Born April 17th, 1849, near Akron. I think it said Ravenna was the place. In 1870, he graduated from the University of Michigan. Spent a year studying law with an attorney in his hometown and another year studying law at the University of Michigan. He was admitted to the Ohio bar in 1872 and spent most of the rest of the 19th century, 1800s, in the private practice. In 1897, President William McKinley appointed him as an assistant U.S. Secretary of State, so he even served in the cabinet. He became the 36th Secretary of State a year later, although he would only hold the position for 5 months. He would then help negotiate peace terms at the end of the Spanish-American War. Yeah, like I've always said, late 1800s into the 1901 time period. In February of 1899, McKinley nominated him to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit. He would spend about 4 years on the court, and then President Teddy Roosevelt nominated him to the U.S. Supreme Court February 19th, 1903. The Senate confirmed him on February 23rd, and he took the judicial oath a week later. He would serve on the court for almost 2 whole decades. In the 1914 decision of Weeks versus U.S., Day articulated an early version of what has become known as the exclusionary rule. Writing for a unanimous court, he found that evidence seized in violation of the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution could not be used in a federal criminal prosecution. Mapp versus Ohio would extend this rule to state courts nearly half a century later. Basically, they have warrants, and it's got to be what they are actually searching for, I believe is what the Fourth Amendment, because it's like you have a right to protection of your house and home. And if they just come in and seize whatever, yeah, you can't use that as evidence. Day wrote another notable opinion in Hammer versus Dagenhart, limiting the commerce power of the Constitution, or Congress under the Constitution. 1918 decision, overruled in 1941, struck down a federal law that sought to disincentivize the use of child labor by banning products of that labor from being sold in interstate commerce. However, Day sometimes gave more leeway to state governments seeking to impose economic regulations for the public good. For example, he dissented in Lochner versus New York, in which the court ruled that the constitutional right to freedom of contract prevented New York from setting maximum working hours for bakers. Basically saying, hey, the worker and the employer have agreed that the worker will work for this amount of hours. If it's more than what you're trying to suggest, you can't limit that. And then, of course, with the Hammer Dagenhart, yeah, basically trying to make child labor unwanted, because if you can't sell it across state lines, that kind of hurts interstate commerce of certain groups. So yeah, he retired from the Supreme Court November 13th, 1922, and was replaced by Justice Pierce Butler, and would die on July 9th, 1923 in Michigan, and was taken back to Ohio for burial. And I've got a number of opinions for him here. Bordeaux versus McDowell, 1921, dealing with search and seizure. The government may retain for use as evidence in criminal prosecution of their own or incriminating documents that are turned over to it by private individuals who procured them through a wrongful search without participation or knowledge of any government official. So if it's an individual who finds them and turns them in, they can turn those documents in, it says. Interesting. The authorities, the government, the police, still can't use that kind of stuff if they seized it themselves without saying that's what they wanted to seize. Let's see. Hammer versus Dagenhart, 1918, The Powers of Congress. The manufacture of goods is not commerce, nor do the facts that they are intended for interstate commerce and are shipped in interstate commerce make their production a part of that commerce subject to the control of Congress. Again, we know it was mainly dealing with how child labor was being used to create the goods for interstate commerce. And let's see, Eastern States Retail Lumber Association versus the U.S. in 1914, when dealing with antitrust, when in this case, by concerted action, the names of wholesalers who were reported as having made sales to consumers are periodically reported to the other members of the associations. The conspiracy to accomplish that which was the natural consequence, such action could be readily inferred. Huh. So yeah. Weeks versus the U.S. 1914, dealing with search and seizure. The tendency of those executing federal criminal laws to obtain convictions by means of unlawful seizures and enforced confessions in violation of federal rights is not to be sanctioned by the courts that are charged with the support of constitutional rights. So again, they must seize, if they have the warrant, what they say they are looking for if they find it. You can't have a warrant for something else different than what you end up seizing. Bob's Merrill Company versus Strauss, 1908, dealing with copyrights. The sole right to vend granted by federal copyright law does not secure to the owner of the copyright the right to qualify future sales by their vendee, or to limit or restrict such future sales at a specified price. Uh, so yeah, just because you own the copyright, if you've already signed the contract for somebody to vend it, you can't just change prices or restrict, limit, stuff like that. And then Wikipedia. Yeah, served as United States Secretary of State under William McKinley, U.S. Circuit Court Judge, U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit, and the U.S. Circuit Courts for the Sixth Circuit. Ravenna, Ohio, one of the children of Emily Spalding and Luther Day. Talked about his grandparents being in the court system. Earned a Bachelor of Science from University of Michigan in 1870. Studied law with attorney and judge George F. Robinson, and then a year in University of Michigan Law School. Admitted to the bar, and settled in Canton, Ohio, where he began practicing law with William A. Lynch. Worked as a criminal defense and corporate lawyer in the growing industrial town while participating in Republican politics. Became a good friend of William McKinley and would become McKinley's legal and political advisor during McKinley's candidacies for the Congress, the governorship of Ohio, and the presidency of the U.S. So, yeah, he had powerful friends in high places. He was appointed the Assistant Secretary of State by McKinley under Secretary of State John Sherman. Sherman was considered ineffective because of health and memory issues and would be replaced with Day, though Day would only be in the position for 5 months because he went on to helm the U.S. Peace Commission formed to negotiate the end of the Spanish-American War. After the war was declared, Day had argued that Spanish colonies other than Cuba should be returned to Spain, contrary to McKinley's decision that the U.S. should take over from Spain control of the Philippines, Puerto Rico, and Guam. However, Day negotiated peace with Spain on McKinley's harsher terms. He was worried the terms would be humiliating for Spain, and for the reason Spain would not agree to them, but Spain would submit to McKinley's terms. Court of Appeals and Circuit Court service. Avid baseball fan, would often leave court after oral argument and go straight to Boundary Field to watch the Washington Senators play. He's recorded as asking his clerk for regular updates during the bench hearing of Standard Sanitary Manufacturing Company versus the U.S. about the final game of the 1912 World Series. Who was in that series? Red Sox and the Giants. Huh. Serve as an umpire of the Mixed Claims Commission to adjudicate war claims against Germany following the First World War. Died on his home in the annex, now named Day College, on Mackinac Island in Michigan at the age of 74, but would be interred at West Lawn Cemetery in Canton, Ohio. Married Mary Elizabeth Schaefer, daughter of Louise Schaefer of Canton, and were married until her death in 1912, and were the parents of 4 sons: William L. Rufus, Rufus S., Stephen A., and Luther. His sons were appellate lawyers who litigated cases before the Supreme Court. Through his son Luther, he is the great-grandfather of actress Anna Gunn. Then they list a bunch of opinions authored by Day, so yeah. But yeah, William R. Day. Now, we will take a look at William Henry Moody, who is from Massachusetts, replacing Brown. I think that was Wendell Brown or Henry Billings Brown. Henry Billings Brown, he replaced, being approved December 12th, 1906 through acclamation. Remember, just everybody saying, yeah, approved, he's a good choice. Though he'd only served 3 years and 338 days, from December 17th, 1906 to December the 20th, 1910. And he was appointed by Teddy Roosevelt. Let's take a look at William Henry Moody. From Oyez. William Moody graduated Harvard College and studied law briefly thereafter. He left law school and apprenticed in a law office in Boston, entering the bar in 1878. Was active in Republican politics and named district attorney for Eastern Massachusetts in 1890. He rose to prominence when he prosecuted the alleged axe murderer Lizzie Borden. Although she was acquitted, his prosecutorial skills was noted by leading Republicans of the day. So yeah, dealt with a famous murder trial. He was the prosecutor, one of the, may have been only one, but it doesn't say. He was just a prosecutor in it. Moody had powerful friends in high places, was close to New York Police Commissioner Teddy Roosevelt, and when Roosevelt assumed the presidency, he called on Moody to serve as Secretary of the Navy. Later, Roosevelt appointed him Attorney General and then elevated him to the highest court to replace Justice Henry Brown. Moody's court career was cut short by a form of crippling rheumatism that forced his early retirement from the bench. Okay. But both appointed to the Supreme Court bench by Teddy Roosevelt, both served in the cabinet, with Day serving in McKinley's cabinet and Roosevelt serving, or Moody serving in Roosevelt's cabinet. First as Secretary of the Navy and then Attorney General. Born in Newbury, Massachusetts, December 23rd, 1853. Died July 2nd, 1917. English. Episcopalian for his religion. Upper class, wealthy family. Mother was Melissa Emerson and father Henry Moody. And his father was a businessman and or farmer. And let's go ahead and take a look at Justia, what they say about him. Justice William Henry Moody joined the U.S. Supreme Court on December 17, 1906, replacing Justice Henry Billings Brown. He was born December 23, 1853, in northern Massachusetts and graduated from Harvard in 1876 and briefly attended Harvard Law School afterward, but then would study law at the office of Richard Henry Dana Jr., the author of 2 Years Before the Most. He was admitted to the Massachusetts bar in 1878. Entered legal practice in Haverhill, Massachusetts, where he was elected as the city attorney in 1888, and 2 years later became the district attorney for the East District of Massachusetts. In 1895, he was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives to fill a vacancy. So he even served in Congress and would be re-elected for 3 more terms there. Roosevelt, when president, would then appoint Moody as U.S. Secretary of the Navy in 1902, and after 2 years in that role, he would be appointed by Roosevelt as U.S. Attorney General. On December 3, 1906, Roosevelt nominated Moody to the U.S. Supreme Court. The Senate confirmed him on December 12th, and he took the judicial oath 5 days later. He spent just under 4 years on the court, struggling with severe rheumatism toward the end of his tenure. He is probably best remembered for his contribution to civil procedure in Louisville and Nashville Railroad Company versus Motley. This addressed the scope of the federal question jurisdiction, which is the basis for a federal court to hear a lawsuit. Moody wrote for the court in holding that federal question jurisdiction cannot be based on an alleged anticipated defense. Say, go through the normal levels. He would retire November the 20th, 1910, and be replaced by Justice Joseph Rucker Lamar. He received full retirement benefits due to a special act that President William Howard Taft persuaded Congress to pass. Moody would spend the rest of his life in Haverhill, dying July the 2nd, 1917. Now let's go ahead and look at some of his cases listed here. Louisville and Nashville Railroad Company versus Motley, dealing with lawsuits and legal procedures. A lawsuit arises under the Constitution and laws of the U.S. only when the plaintiff's statements of their own cause of action shows that it was based on those laws or that Constitution. It is not enough that the plaintiff alleges that some anticipated defense to their cause of action and asserts that the defense is invalidated by constitutional provision. You still got to follow up the chain. It doesn't matter what you believe, that what defense the defense shall use. And Londoner versus Denver, 1908, dealing with government agencies. When the legislature commits the determination of the tax to a subordinate body, due process requires that a taxpayer be afforded a hearing of which they must have notice. When the taxpayer has no right to object to an assessment in court, they must have the opportunity to support their objections by argument and proof at some time and place. Essentially, the taxpayer has a right to defend why they feel they should not be taxed this amount. So, yeah. Let's see. And finally, Wikipedia. Held positions in all 3 branches of government. Yep. Presented parts of Essex County, Massachusetts. Represented parts of Essex County, Massachusetts in the U.S. House of Representatives in Congress. from 1895 to 1902, then served in the cabinet, the executive branch, under Teddy Roosevelt as Secretary of Navy and Attorney General before being put on the U.S. Supreme Court, the Judicial branch. So yeah, legislative, executive, judicial. Retired for health, and like Roosevelt, he was a progressive and opposed racial segregation and spoke out in favor of African American civil rights. Son of Henry Lord Moody and Melissa Augusta Emerson Moody. Father owned and managed several farms, and Moody attended local schools of Newberry, Salem, and Danvers. All of his immigrant ancestors came to Massachusetts from England, and they all came as part of the Puritan migration, arriving between 1620 and 1640. So yeah, a lot of the individuals that landed at Plymouth Rock graduated from Phillips Academy in 1872 and Harvard University Phi Beta Kappa in 1876. Spent 4 months Harvard Law School before moving on to study law under Richard Henry Dana Jr. and attain admission to the Massachusetts bar. He would be elected city solicitor of Haverhill, Massachusetts in 1888, and then appointed as district attorney for eastern Massachusetts in 1890, gaining widespread notoriety as the junior prosecutor in the Lizzie Borden murder case. Yeah. Lizzie Borden's house, if you're a fan of haunted houses and stuff, is supposed to be haunted and everything. But of course, there's also the fairy tale. Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks, and when she was done, she gave her father 41. I think that's quite a bit shortened down, but that's the general idea of how the poem goes. Spent time in U.S. Congress. While representative, he served on the Appropriations Committee, also holding seats on Insular Affairs, Expenditures in the Department of Justice, and Joint Commission on Transportation of the Mails. Was a candidate to succeed Thomas B. Reed as Speaker of the House, but wouldn't end up winning the seat, Speaker of the House position. That would be won by David B. Henderson. Oversaw Roosevelt-era expansion of the Navy as Secretary of the Navy, increasing the number of ships, as well as an effort to increase manpower by improving efforts to recruit from non-coastal states. Served as Attorney General from 1904 to 1906. Actively followed Roosevelt's trust-busting policies. Speak softly, carry a big stick was often what was quoted as Roosevelt. But yeah, negotiating with good trusts, such as U.S. Steel, but successfully prosecuting bad ones, such as Standard Oil and the Beef Trust. After the lynching of Paul Reed and Will Cato, Moody refused to grant permission for an indictment, believing no federal right had been violated. were tried and convicted, though. I guess that's why he was thinking that, but nominated for the Supreme Court. Suffered from severe rheumatism. Was not married, had no children. Died in Haverhill, Massachusetts at the age of 63, but was buried at Byfield Cemetery in Georgetown, Massachusetts. Received the honorary degree of LL.D. from Tufts University and Amherst College. Some of his official papers after his death were placed in the custody of Professor Felix Frankfurter, then of Harvard Law School. They are now in the collection of Frankfurter's papers in the manuscript division of the Library of Congress. His office furnishings and papers were donated to the Haverhill Historical Society, and there is a Moody room open to the public at the Buttonwoods Museum in Haverhill that features his personal collection. The USS Moody DD 277 was named for him. And in 2018, television and film actor Jay Hughley portrayed Moody in the film Lizzie, a biographical thriller film about Lizzie Borden. So yeah, William Henry Moody. But that's the look at today's two members of the Supreme Court as associate justices. We've got two more for the Fuller Court, and that brings us to a new Chief Justice. But yeah, with that said and done, we'll go ahead and end this episode here. As always, educate thyself, think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources, and it can't be tinfoil hat wearing sources or a bunch of anecdotes thrown together to try to make a source. You know, like a man once saw another man, or once heard from another man how he had drove a gopher out by playing a musical piece and then captured the gopher. No, no. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.